three different varietals, Chardonnay and Pinot, Cab being kind of the outlier from the other two.
Yeah.
Where did you decide? How did you decide to plant where?
Yeah. So thank you, Paul. It's a great question, because in an effort to be abbreviated, which I certainly wasn't, I didn't talk about the Chardonnay or the Cab. So they're all, for those who've seen, they're all under their own label, because they're really, to me, they're different things, not only just by variety, but Native9 is only at Rancho Ontiveros, which is at the southern end of the Santa Maria Valley, AVA, and probably kind of in the middle in terms of east-west. I think it's probably about the center. But very different. When you're on the south side of the Santa Maria Valley, the climate's not that dissimilar from one end to the other. It does get a little warmer as you go east, as you get out to like Rancho Sisquoc would be the eastern extremity. It's a little warmer out there than it would be at like Solomon Hills or Sierra Madre, which I'm a little bit closer to. But it's not a world apart. What is are the soils. And so super generally, as you cross to the south side of the Santa Maria Valley, you're on wind-blown silts and sand. And when you're on the north side of the Santa Maria River, like you said, valley, but really you could use the river as the dividing line. Now you're on soils that have come down as alluvium off of the San Rafael mountain range and are generally, I want to say, tens of millions of years older. And so it's really fascinating that you can be like so close, but the soils have like nothing to do with each other. And so with so much of my career at Vineyards, where I was slicing and dicing by row on these alluvial soils that came off the San Rafael, Rancho Vineyards literally, you could underhand a rock and it lands in the adjacent Rancho Vineyards from Vineyards. And so it's very similar to that alluvial component on its top, but because it's actually closer to the river, it's got this massive cobble conglomerate from the river wash, and then those alluvial soils coming over the top. And so it actually is a pretty different thing, even though there are some similarities to Vineyards and that whole stretch of, wearing my other hat, my company owns the Nielsen Vineyard now on the kind of eastern end next to Sisquoc. All that soil is really similar, but it's not once you cross the river. So to me, there was this component of it's its own thing over there, just from a natural resource perspective. And then also, it was planted in 1973 by Bob and Jean Woods and their children, who are now, Robin and his wife are very adult, but planted in 73 to Winte clone 72, which we never had at Vineyards. We were dealing just with clone 4. And so when I gave notice to the Miller family after over a decade that I was going to be leaving to start this other company, I gave them 6 months notice because the relationship meant a lot. I didn't want to leave quickly or leave them in a bad position. So that word got out, and the Woods family, I had just actually, not in a religious way, just in a community trying to help way, had just presided over Bob Wood's funeral service. That was actually at the old Ontiveros adobe at Vineyards. And so Robin, his son, said, I've heard that you're going to leave the Millers. And I said, yeah, it's just, awesome place, but, I'm not ever going to be the owner here. There's no daughter for me to marry. I gotta go do my own thing. And so he said, well, what? I don't know how it quickly became, what do you think about Rancho Vineyards? I said, well, I don't know other than some of the wines. That vineyard had gone to Au Bon Climat exclusively since 1986. And so the only reference point you could have would have been through the ABC wines, but they were terrific. Ironically, I was mentioning some of these restaurateurs earlier, Roy Yamaguchi, Emerald Lagasse, all of the initial, what they call private label, if you will, or control label that were for those restaurateurs, every one of them came from Rancho Viñedo. So it was Roy's, Rancho Viñedo, Oklahoma. And so when I had the opportunity to lease it and ultimately buy it, it was already its own thing. It predated my being born. It was, although I look 70, I wasn't born until 74. The vineyard's older than I was. And so to me, it was about the respect in which the whole thing happened. Is I thought it would be appropriate for me to continue on with the name that they had given it. And it was a remarkable site on its own. So that was the thinking there. And I'm super glad I did. It certainly doesn't make it easy for Wes or Nina to discuss how this wine brand has evolved. But then with Cabernet, between the fact that a lot of my friends, I grew up around cattle and rodeo. And so a lot of my friends who want to support what I do, they don't drink wines like this. At best, they started drinking wine maybe 10 years ago, and they wanted punched in the face with a huge Cabernet if they weren't drinking bourbon or Coors Light. And so I kept realizing, like, I used to really enjoy Cabernet when I started my career, the stuff from like 70s and 80s, when they were leaner and more savory, and were oftentimes criticized for that, being a little kind of tapenade or green or vegetative, and I really liked that. And so I started thinking, well, it'd be nice to make a cab that doesn't have to be so big. And so I developed a little vineyard in the Los Olivos district, so just kind of west of Happy Canyon. And the Cabernet is exclusively at this point from that site. And kind of intended to be that kind of, they're still big, powerful wines, but not so ripe and unctuous. So that's the whole lineup. So between the Cabernet, which I can't blame anyone else other than myself. I just call it Ranchos de Ontiveros because it was neither Native9 nor Rancho Viñedo. And so I just thought it's like one more ranch I gotta go look at. So Ranchos de Ontiveros. So that's the three wines until we release the Sparkle.